That camera light's working actually.
Great.
Okay, let's do this. So
Okay.
you can say,
Do we need to do an intro?
yeah. So I'm Dr. Melendez. I'm the head principal at McClure High School.
And I am Dr. Mason. I'm the Director of Inclusion, Equity, and Diversity for Lindbergh Schools.
Excellent. So I know you got some questions for me today. We're talking about stories and the stories we tell and the beliefs we hold. And so I think it's important that we think about um, what brought us into this profession and this work. And so I'll allow you to take the lead with it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I know that a huge staple in our district to cultivate, positive relationships is that idea of belonging.
Yeah.
And so, along with that, we know that stories are a really, really important piece of cultivating that belonging. And so, with that, will you kind of share a little bit about your story?
I did. We talked a
and
little bit
tell
offline.
us, and tell us kind of what brought you into education.
Good question. For me, I never wanted to be an educator. As a high school student, I hated school. And whenever I think about this question, I can't help but go back to my childhood and my upbringing on the south side of Chicago.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it begins with my mom, who's 17 years old. She's a student still in high school when she has me. And I'm born into poverty on the south side of Chicago. My dad, young as well, being misguided, doesn't claim me as his own. And so my mom has to take him to court and get a test. And the judge says he's 99% yours.
Wow.
And so, but my mom does something. She gives me her name and not his. And so that begins to shape the trajectory of me and part of my story of how I get into education. You know, we were poor, and so we were on food stamps. I remember going to the grocery store and being jumped for food stamps on the south side of Chicago. It was pretty violent at times. I had to learn how to fight early on. And the thing that I did not ever feel, though, was that I did not feel like I never belonged. When I was on the south side, everyone was like me. I didn't even know I was poor. I just thought I was like everybody else. And it wasn't until when we moved to Park Ridge and my mom sent me to a school system that she thought was going to be better for me that I realized that I was poor and black. And so many times families are left to make that kind of sacrifice in our communities. They want to give their child a better education, and then they're compromising culture between education, right? And so my mom not being aware of that, you know, she's white. And the reality is that she doesn't know what it was like to be a person of color growing up. But when I went to that all-white school, I realized that my skin didn't look like theirs, that my hair wasn't like theirs. I had curly hair that wouldn't stay straight. My nose was bigger. My lips are bigger. And I remember trying to make my smile like this, trying to make my lips skinny. And I remember the teachers, though, they're taking a true interest into me as a person, though, nevertheless, despite all that. I had one teacher that was super caring. And she even had us all, she showed a lot of love, and I still remember her name. It's crazy that you remember your elementary teachers' names. I'm not saying that she is the reason I went to education, because she is not. Still didn't like school. But you know, I went there from 3rd grade to 6th grade, and then my mom and her boyfriend had been dating for a while, and they decided to buy a house in the south suburbs of Chicago. And so then my identity and my status changed again, and I went from being poor and black to now being rich and white, because we moved to an area that was much more diverse. And so the black kids said I acted white. And to them, I was now rich because I lived in one of the houses where everybody else in the neighborhood lived in townhomes and in apartments. And I lived in one of the big houses on the block. I mean, the house was even big to me. It was a shock to me when I moved into it. I didn't even think it was mine. I said, Mom, we live here? She's like, yeah, we live here now. And so my identity shifted. And all I wanted as a middle school kid was to belong and to be accepted.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for sharing that. I mean, we kind of see this thing where, you know, you grew up in maybe a more poverty-stricken area, maybe kind of more violent, but you said you felt like you belonged, right? You had a sense of
Right.
normalcy, people that looked like you, community, and your mom only wanted the best for you.
She did.
And so then going from the education system in the inner city to now going to the suburbs, you kind of gave us your experience there. But I really want to kind of hit on this idea of belonging a little deeper. So
Yeah.
when you were at the suburban school, you talked about a teacher that had a profound impact on you, but what are some of those other pieces that you kind of leaned on to really deepen that sense of belonging in that environment, if any?
Yeah, I mean, again, you just every kid wants to be accepted. They want to fit in. And so I remember really trying to learn a new culture. That's what it came down to. I was outside of my element. I didn't have the money that they had, and so I couldn't keep up with the fashion clothes. I didn't realize what Abercrombie and Fitch was at the time, right? I tried to dress the way they dress. I tried to look the way they look. I tried to listen to the music that they listen to. Um, I wanted to just be a part of that world, right? That group of people, and um, I actually started playing sports with them. I played football for the first time in my life at Park Ridge. I didn't play football in Chicago. Actually, I didn't play any sports until we moved to Park Ridge, which is fascinating. Yeah, I didn't play any sports until I was in third grade. Chicago, I was just throwing rocks at cars. But in we the belonging though, and this was the most powerful thing for me. The first time I felt seen was in Park Ridge, and it wasn't because of anybody there. It's because I was sitting on my mom's bed watching TV one day, and a song by Nelly comes on, Country Grammar, and he has a do rag on. His skin looks like my skin. He has these baggy clothes, and I'm like, I want to be like that.
Wow.
And my mom was like, absolutely not. That's thug behavior. She was totally against it. And so that played a dynamic on this tug of war that began to play out between me and my mom. The identity I wanted to embrace and the acceptance I felt from people of color um, came at a cost to her. She saw it as thuggish and ghetto. And she was trying to keep me from that because that was the environment she grew up in.
Gotcha.
And so when we did move to the south suburbs, and I went back to the school, I started hanging around those kids because these were the kids that lived in the projects in the city. And when they were removed from their homes, they moved to the south suburbs of Chicago when they tore down all the projects. They were living in Section 8 housing. And so the culture of the city that I grew up with now found its way at Bolingbrook, where I was growing up. And so I had perfect attendance. I was an honor roll student when I went to Bolingbrook High School because I got caught up at Park Ridge with my educational journey. But I wanted to fit in so bad that my freshman year, I got D's and F's on my report card and I was arrested. My sophomore year, I missed 40 days of school. My junior year, I missed 70 days of school and I was arrested again. And they told me that if I got caught stealing one more time, I was going to have a felony on my record. And so my senior year, I moved to an entire different school district. I wanted to be an athlete. I was an all-star baseball player in high school. And but I really, really want to be a football player. And I really want to be the starting running back. And so I decided, and honestly, that's the only way that I thought I was going to go to college was through sports because I didn't have any teachers in high school that really saw that potential in me. My identity shifted. I was no longer the honor roll kid. I was a troublemaker. I was sleeping. I was a kid who did not want to learn, who was unmotivated. And the reality is that I didn't like school. And so my senior year, though, I go to this other school district and I'm not doing the things I need to. They find out I don't live there and they put me out. And I'm out of school for a month and I barely graduate high school. I graduated with a 1.9 GPA. My mom eventually gets me back into the school district that I was put out of because we lose our home to the '07 market crash. And so we lost our home and our house was foreclosed on and we actually did have to move. And so we moved to the school district that I was lying about, that said I lived at. And I ended up graduating barely, but I did. And I'm lost out of high school. I go to the community college and I am dropping my classes. I'm feeling depressed. I meet a girl on MySpace. She lives in St. Louis. I decide that I'm going to get my stuff together and move all the way to St. Louis. And that summer, I packed everything up and I decided to leave. And my mom and I are both crying. And she says, when you get to St. Louis, promise me one thing, you'll find a church. And so I said, I promise. We never went to church our whole life, y'all. But she wanted me to find a church. And so I get to St. Louis and I'm depressed and I'm working at an automotive shop and the guy teaches me the Bible for the first time. And I go home and I start reading more and it changes me. And so I start going to my community college in St. Louis and I'm speaking to my professors and I'm talking to them and they're like, you sound wise, you sound this. And no one has ever said that to me my whole life. But suddenly my identity has shifted again because my environment again has changed. Each time my identity shifted, it came with an environmental change. And so I moved. So I'm now considered wise. I'm considered profound, and I'm studying the Bible. And there's 3 careers I'm considering: being a teacher, being a lawyer, being a physician. I want to be as much like Christ as I possibly can. And I asked my professor one day after debating her, I'm like, I got straight A's. I never had straight A's ever in my life in college. And she said, you ever think about being an educator? We need more male role models. And so this idea of defying these statistics, these labels that were bet against me, um, all of that came to me in that moment. And I realized that I can be the educator that I wish I had in my life growing up for a
Yeah,
bunch of other kids. And that's why I decided to go into the profession.
that's awesome. Wow, that is a story for sure. You've had a lot of different moving pieces,
Yeah.
um, or culminating factors that have kind of met you in this moment,
Yeah.
right? So I want you to now kind of think about your why. When you think about all of those moving pieces, when you think about those important factors of your story,
Yeah.
how does it cultivate your why? Um, within your principalship here
Yeah.
at McClure High.
I mean, I'm just stepping into the gap, right? I'm just trying to save as many students as I possibly can. Education was what transformed me, right? Each of those environments, I was learning something new. And the reality is that I was stepping into microcosms of different communities, and those communities had their own beliefs, their own stories that they were telling, right? And I'm now entering into these different communities with my identity and trying to figure out who I am in the midst of that. And I'm learning and I'm studying from that. And I'm unlearning things and relearning things in the process about myself, about people. And so when I think about what I'm doing right now as an educator, I'm cognizant that our students are bringing home their own story, bringing into our school system their various stories about what they've been taught at home. And I'm trying to create collective space for all of those stories to exist, but then also create a shared value system that accelerates us forward. And for me, that is my why. My why is to help people live out the best versions of themselves, to be the best expression of themselves. And I do it through the vehicle being a high school principal.
Wow,
Boom. We're
that
done.
is awesome.
Stop there.